The sound of my snow machine roaring to life at 3 in the morning wasn't something I planned. But when dispatch called about a missing child in the Chugach Mountains, I didn't have time to worry about waking the neighbors in our subdivision outside Anchorage, Alaska. I'm Gregory Garrison, and I've lived in the Whispering Pines development for 5 years now, ever since I moved up from Colorado for work as a mechanical engineer at one of the oil companies. The gated community seemed like a good investment at the time, with its well-maintained roads and strict standards that kept property values high. What I didn't anticipate was how those strict standards would become a weapon in the hands of certain residents who had nothing better to do than police everyone else's lives. The search and rescue pager had gone off at 2:45, its shrill beeping cutting through my dreams. I was already pulling on my thermal layers before I was fully conscious, muscle memory taking over after 3 years of volunteer work with the Anchorage Mountain Rescue Service. A 7-year-old boy had wandered away from a family camping trip in the Eagle River Valley, and with temperatures dropping to 15 below zero, every minute counted. My snow machine sat in my driveway under a cover, ready to go as always during winter months. I kept it there specifically for rescue calls, since the firehouse where we staged was 20 minutes away, and in emergencies, I could get to the mountains faster by leaving directly from home. The HOA had complained about it before, citing some obscure rule about recreational vehicles being visible from the street, but I'd fought back, providing documentation from the rescue service explaining its necessity. I yanked off the cover, started the engine, and felt the powerful machine rumble beneath me. The headlight cut through the darkness as I backed out of my driveway, the engine noise echoing off the houses around me. I saw a light flip on in the house across the street, the one belonging to Brenda Patterson, the HOA president and the bane of my existence for the past year. But I didn't have time to think about Brenda or her complaints. I gunned the throttle and headed toward the mountain roads, following the coordinates dispatch had sent to my phone. The cold air bit at any exposed skin as I accelerated, the snow machine handling perfectly on the icy residential streets before I reached the highway. The search area was chaos when I arrived, with rescue vehicles parked haphazardly along the roadside and headlamps bobbing through the trees. I recognized Tom Henderson, our search coordinator, standing near the mobile command unit. "Greg, good you're here," Tom said, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "We've got 3 teams out already, but we need someone to check the ravine system to the east. The family said the kid was fascinated by a frozen waterfall they saw on the hike in." I nodded, already mentally mapping the terrain. I'd trained in that area a dozen times. I can get there faster than anyone on foot. What's he wearing? Red jacket, blue snow pants. Name's Timothy. He's got a whistle and the parents said he's a smart kid, knows to stay put if he's lost. "Let's hope he remembered that," I said, adjusting my emergency pack and checking my radio. "I'll radio in every 15 minutes. The ride to the ravine system took 20 minutes of careful navigation through dense forest. The terrain was treacherous, with hidden obstacles beneath the snow and low-hanging branches that could knock an unwary rider off their machine. I'd made this run in training exercises, but never with real stakes, never knowing that a child's life hung in the balance. I killed the engine when I reached the area Tom had indicated and listened. The forest was eerily silent, the kind of quiet that only exists in deep winter when every sound is muffled by snow. I cupped my hands around my mouth and called out, "Timothy, can you hear me?" "My name is Greg. I'm here to help you." Nothing. I moved forward on foot, sweeping my high-powered flashlight across the landscape. The frozen waterfall Tom mentioned was magnificent, a cascade of ice gleaming in my light about 100 yards ahead. It was exactly the kind of thing that would captivate a young boy. I called out again, and this time I heard something. A faint sound, almost like a bird. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again, a whistle, weak but unmistakable. "Timothy, keep blowing that whistle, buddy. I'm coming to get you." I followed the sound, moving as quickly as I dared over the uneven ground. The whistle grew stronger, and then my light caught a flash of red fabric. The boy was huddled in a small depression near the base of the frozen waterfall, partially sheltered by an overhanging rock. "Hey there, Timothy," I said, keeping my voice calm and friendly as I approached. "I bet you're cold, huh?" The kid looked up at me with enormous eyes, his face streaked with tears that had frozen on his cheeks. He was shivering violently, and I could see his lips had a bluish tinge. Hypothermia, but he was conscious and alert. That was good. "My mom and dad," he managed through chattering teeth. "They're waiting for you, and they're going to be so happy to see you," I said, already wrapping him in the emergency blanket from my pack and activating a chemical heat pack. "You did exactly the right thing, staying in one place and using that whistle. You're a very smart kid." I radioed Tom with the good news and gave my coordinates. "Patient is hypothermic but responsive. I'm going to start moving him back to my snow machine. Have medical standing by." "Roger that, Greg. Fantastic work." I bundled Timothy up as thoroughly as I could and lifted him carefully. He was light, probably 70 pounds, and I made good time getting back to where I'd left the snow machine. I positioned him in front of me, keeping him wrapped tightly, and started the engine. The ride back was slower, more careful, but Timothy had stopped shivering as violently, which could be good or bad. I kept talking to him, asking him about school, his favorite video games, anything to keep him engaged and conscious. He mumbled answers, his voice getting a bit stronger as the chemical heat packs did their work. When we emerged from the tree line, I could see the flashing lights of an ambulance. Timothy's parents were there too, his mother collapsing to her knees when she saw us, sobbing with relief. The paramedics took over, moving efficiently to assess Timothy's condition while I gave them a quick rundown of his status and how long he'd been exposed. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "Outstanding job, Greg. That kid's going to be fine thanks to you." I felt the familiar rush of exhaustion and satisfaction that came after a successful rescue. This was why I joined the volunteer team, why I trained every month and kept my gear ready. These moments made all the preparation worthwhile. By the time I headed home, the sun was starting to rise, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold. I was bone tired, running on adrenaline fumes, and all I wanted was a hot shower and my bed. I pulled into my driveway just after 7 in the morning. The neighborhood was coming to life, with a few people scraping ice off their windshields and starting their cars. I backed the snow machine into its spot, too tired to put the cover on properly. I'd deal with it later. I barely made it inside before collapsing on my couch, not even bothering to take off all my gear. Sleep hit me like a hammer. The pounding on my door woke me what felt like minutes later. I blinked at the clock on my wall and realized it was almost noon. The pounding continued, insistent and angry. I dragged myself to the door and opened it to find Brenda Patterson standing there with her arms crossed, her face pinched with fury. She was 52, with that particular haircut that seemed to be standard issue for HOA presidents everywhere, the kind that said she wanted to speak to the manager of life itself. "You have any idea what time you woke up half the neighborhood?" she demanded before I could even say hello. I rubbed my eyes, my brain still foggy with exhaustion. "Brenda, I was on a rescue call. A child was missing." I don't care if the president himself was missing, she snapped. You violated noise ordinances and disturbed the peace. Multiple residents have complained. I've already filed an HOA violation and I called the police. That woke me up. You called the police? Of course I did. You can't just go tearing through a residential neighborhood on that monstrosity at 3 in the morning. There are rules, Gregory, rules that everyone else manages to follow. I felt anger bubbling up through the exhaustion. A 7-year-old boy was dying of hypothermia in the mountains. I'm a volunteer with Mountain Rescue. That Snowmachine is part of my emergency equipment. Then you should keep it at the fire station, or wherever it is you people operate from, Brenda said, her voice dripping with disdain. Not in a residential driveway where it's an eyesore and a noise disturbance. We've been through this, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I provided documentation explaining why I need quick access to my equipment. The HOA board approved it 2 years ago. That was before I was president, Brenda countered. And I'm implementing new standards. The Snowmachine needs to go, or you'll face escalating fines. Starting at $500 per violation. Before I could respond, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. My stomach sank. Brenda had actually called the cops on me for saving a kid's life. Officer Sarah Chen stepped out of the vehicle, and I recognized her from a community safety meeting the year before. She approached with a neutral expression, her hand resting casually on her belt. "Good afternoon," she said. "I received a call about a noise disturbance in the early morning hours." "Gregory Garrison, that's me," I said. "Officer, I was responding to a search and rescue call. I'm a volunteer with Anchorage Mountain Rescue Service." Officer Chen's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of recognition. "The missing boy in Eagle River Valley. I heard about that over the radio." "You found him?" "Yes, madam. I left here at about 2:50 in the morning after getting the page." She nodded slowly, then turned to Brenda. "Madam, rescue personnel are generally exempt from noise ordinances when responding to emergencies." Brenda's face reddened. "This is a private community with our own rules. The HOA has regulations about when recreational vehicles can be operated. It's not a recreational vehicle when it's being used for emergency response," Officer Chen said patiently. "Just like how ambulances and fire trucks can use their sirens at any hour, volunteer rescue personnel have the same protections under Alaska state law." "This is ridiculous," Brenda sputtered. "So he can just wake everyone up whenever he feels like it?" "No, only when he's responding to a legitimate emergency call," Officer Chen clarified. She turned to me. "You received a page from dispatch." I pulled out my phone and showed her the message log, complete with the time stamp and coordinates. She examined it and nodded. "This is legitimate emergency response. I can't issue a citation, and your HOA's regulations can't supersede state law regarding emergency services." She looked at Brenda. "If you have concerns about the noise, I'd suggest taking it up with the rescue service, but I can tell you right now that they're not going to tell their volunteers they can't respond to calls." Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "This is unacceptable. I'll be contacting my lawyer." "That's your right," Officer Chen said, "but I'm not issuing any citations here today. Mr. Garrison was performing a valuable community service." She turned to me and lowered her voice. "The kid okay, hypothermic but alive. He's going to be fine." "Good work," she said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "We need more people willing to volunteer like you do." She returned to her cruiser and Brenda stood there on my doorstep, practically vibrating with rage. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll find a way to make you comply with community standards." "Brenda, I'm just trying to help people," I said, suddenly too tired to be angry anymore. Why are you making this such a big deal? Because if we don't maintain standards, this entire community falls apart, she said. Property values depend on everyone following the rules. Your snow machine is an eyesore. You work irregular hours. Your lawn wasn't edged properly last summer, and you painted your mailbox without getting approval from the architectural committee. I stared at her. My mailbox. It was the exact same color it already was. I was touching up rust spots. You should have submitted the paint color for approval first, she said primly. It's all in the HOA handbook. She turned on her heel and marched back to her car, a silver Mercedes that was always perfectly clean despite Alaska's winter conditions. I watched her drive away and wondered, not for the first time, what made someone wake up and decide their life's purpose was to make other people miserable. I went back inside and tried to return to sleep, but I was too wound up. Instead, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the snow machine in my driveway. It was a Polaris 850, purpose-built for backcountry rescue work, with a long track for deep snow and mounting points for medical equipment. It had cost me $12,000, and it was worth every penny for the lives it helped save. The reality was that I could keep it at the rescue service staging area, but that would add at least 20 minutes to my response time for calls. In winter conditions, with hypothermia or avalanche victims, 20 minutes could mean the difference between life and death. I'd explained this to the HOA board when I first moved in, and they'd been reasonable about it. But that was before Brenda. My phone rang, and I saw it was Tom Henderson. "Hey, Greg, just wanted to give you an update," he said. "Timothy's going to make a full recovery. No permanent damage, and he's already asking when he can go camping again. His parents want your contact info so they can thank you properly." "That's great news," I said, feeling some of the tension drain from my shoulders. "Really great. You sound beat. Get some rest." "We've got training scheduled for next Saturday, but take the week off if you need it." After we hung up, I did manage to sleep for a few more hours. When I woke again, it was dark outside and I felt more human. I made myself dinner and tried to relax, but my mind kept circling back to Brenda's threat about escalating fines. The next morning, I found a formal violation notice taped to my front door. It cited me for noise disturbance, improper storage of a recreational vehicle, and failure to maintain the notice also informed me that I had 10 days to correct the violations or face a $500 fine, with subsequent fines doubling for each repeat offense. I took a picture of the notice and emailed it to Tom, along with a brief explanation of the situation. He called me back within an hour. "This is absurd," Tom said. "We've dealt with HOA issues before with other volunteers. I'm going to have our legal advisor draft a letter explaining your status as emergency personnel and the legal protections that come with it." "I appreciate that, but I have a feeling Brenda isn't going to back down easily." "Then we'll make noise," Tom said firmly. "The rescue service has good relationships with local media. If your HOA wants to prevent you from saving lives, I guarantee the news stations would love to hear about it." "I don't want this to become a circus," I said. "Sometimes you need a circus to make people see reason," Tom replied. "Let me handle it. You just focus on staying ready for the next call." The letter from the rescue service's legal advisor arrived via certified mail 3 days later, addressed to both me and the HOA board. It was thorough and professional, citing specific Alaska statutes that protected emergency responders from local ordinances that would interfere with their ability to respond to calls. It explained my role as a volunteer rescue technician and the critical nature of rapid response times in mountain rescue operations. I made copies and delivered one personally to Brenda's house. She answered the door in a bathrobe, even though it was 3 in the afternoon. "I'm not discussing HOA business at my home," she said, trying to close the door. I held up the letter. "This is from the legal advisor for Anchorage Mountain Rescue Service. It explains why your violation notice isn't valid." She snatched the letter from my hand and scanned it, her expression growing more pinched with each line. "I'll be forwarding this to our HOA attorney. We'll see what they have to say. Brenda, can I ask you something? Why are you doing this? Is it really about the snow machine, or is there something else going on?" Her eyes flashed. "You want to know what's going on? I'll tell you. People like you move into communities like this and think the rules don't apply to you. You think because you have some volunteer position that makes you special, that you can do whatever you want. Well, you can't. This is a community with standards, and I'm not going to let it decline on my watch." "I'm not trying to decline anything," I said. "I'm trying to help people who are in trouble in the mountains." "Then do it somewhere else," she said, and slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, trying to process the level of hostility. It wasn't just about the snow machine or the noise. Brenda had decided I was her enemy, and she was going to make my life difficult no matter what I did. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I cleared my schedule and showed up early, taking a seat in the community center where the meetings were held. About 20 other residents trickled in, most of them the usual crowd of retirees and busybodies who lived for these gatherings. Brenda called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. She went through the usual business, discussing landscaping contracts and the budget for snow removal. Then she got to what she called the matter of ongoing violations. "As many of you know, we have a resident who has been repeatedly violating our community standards," she began, and I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. "Despite receiving formal notice, this resident continues to operate loud machinery at unreasonable hours and maintain unsightly equipment in violation of our architectural guidelines." I raised my hand. "I'd like to speak to that." Brenda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Residents may speak during the public comment period at the end of the meeting." "Actually, the bylaws say residents can speak to any item under discussion if it directly concerns them," I said. I'd done my homework, reading through the entire HOA handbook the night before. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Finally, Dan Morrison, the vice president, nodded. "He's right, Brenda. Let him speak." I stood up and addressed the room. "My name is Gregory Garrison, and I'm a volunteer rescue technician with Anchorage Mountain Rescue Service. 2 weeks ago, I responded to a call about a missing 7-year-old boy. I left my house at 2:50 in the morning because every minute counts in a rescue situation, especially in winter conditions. I used my snow machine, which is specifically equipped for backcountry rescue, to reach the search area and ultimately found the child suffering from hypothermia. He's alive today because I was able to respond quickly." I pulled out copies of the letter from the rescue service's legal advisor and passed them around the room. Alaska state law protects emergency responders from local ordinances that would prevent them from doing their jobs. I'm not operating recreational equipment. I'm using emergency response tools to save lives. One of the residents, an older woman named Margaret, raised her hand. "I heard about that rescue on the news. That was you." "Yes, madam. That little boy's family lives in my church," she said. "They were devastated when he went missing. You brought him home to them." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and I saw Brenda's expression darken. "That's all very noble," Brenda said, her voice sharp, "but it doesn't change the fact that this is a residential community with rules. If Mr. Garrison wants to be a hero, He should live somewhere more appropriate for his activities. Are you seriously suggesting he should move because he volunteers to save lives? Margaret asked, her voice rising in disbelief. I'm suggesting that no one person is more important than the community as a whole, Brenda shot back. We all make sacrifices to live here. We all follow rules we might not personally agree with because that's what maintains our property values. Dan Morrison cleared his throat. Brenda, I think we need to consider the legal implications here. This letter is pretty clear that we could be opening ourselves up to liability if we try to prevent emergency response activities. Then we need to modify our bylaws, Brenda said stubbornly. We can't modify bylaws to violate state law, Dan said. That's not how this works. The meeting devolved into argument with residents taking sides. Some agreed with Brenda that rules were rules, while others thought the HOA was being ridiculous. I sat through it all, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with being the center of so much conflict. Finally, the board voted on whether to pursue the violation notice against me. It was 3-2 against, with Brenda and 1,